Welcome, friends, wizards and muggles alike, to another episode of the Wizard Factory podcast. Tonight's episode is very special. We've been really waiting for this one and planning and making sure everything is right and all the stars have aligned. Tonight we're joined by Mr. Mark Passio, the man who probably needs no introduction, but Mark is a researcher and presenter in the world of the occult, topics of, mind control, esoteric sciences, and things of that nature. So welcome, Mark. So happy to have you on the show with us.
Logan, Brian, thank you so much for bringing me onto the show. It's a pleasure to be here.
Very cool. And so, tonight's topic, we're going to be discussing heart-based intelligence. So, I think a good way to kind of set the stage is to sort of define your terms. So, Mark, why don't you start by telling us what that concept means to you?
Well, to me, it's sort of synonymous with real conscience, with really knowing the difference between right and wrong behavior, and then living that, actively applying it in your life because you care to not do harm through your behavior to other sentient beings. And, this is part of, everything that I talked about in my natural law seminar, that true holistic intelligence is not just the intellect, as so many people today seem to think that it is. You can crunch numbers all day long and, to me, not really be a truly intelligent person, because you're lacking care of the heart. And this is the generative principle. This is the thing that really creates the human experience collectively. As they refer to it, or as I've referred to it as the lost principle, or the lost part of the seven Hermetic principles. This is the eighth principle in that tradition that I feel surrounds and binds all of the other aspects of the underlying principles of natural law, because what we care enough to do with our behavior is what gets manifested into the world. And that's the second part of intelligence. If you just break the word down, it's the heart-based or generative principle of care is actually inside the word intelligence. The first part of it refers to the intellect, and that would be like the left brain, the just brain-based intelligence in general, being able to analyze things and, being able to see patterns, etc. But then you have the generative aspect of it, the creative side of it. This is more of a not only big picture type of thought, but it is a heart-based aspect, because it is about what we care about, and it is about our care and our desire to do the right thing, to choose right behavior over wrong behavior. And that's where that generative principle, that integrates right into the word intelligence. So that is how I would look at heart-based intelligence. It is true care. It is true empathy for other beings, and it is understanding and really coming to terms with what behaviors are truly right behaviors because they do not cause harm to others, and what behaviors are wrong behaviors because they do initiate harm to others.
Right. Brian, what do you have?
Sure, yeah, I'd love to go. No, I think that's absolutely great. And for me as well, I think we can also look at it as being able to tap into that truest and deepest inner knowing that we all have on some level, that voice that's always been there, that is the real you, that is the very core essence of who you are, and being able to tap into that and then listen to it and to recognize it and then be able to take action with that.
Well, I'd like to chime in on an aspect of what Brian was saying, and it's taking the time to self-reflect, to look at your own behavior, to look at some of the negative aspects of our behavior that we often don't want to look at. This is shadow work. This is what all occultism really is attempting to teach people to do, to stare into the mirror of the soul and be honest about what is there. And most people aren't doing that because they're so wrapped up in the left brain and in the constant chatter of thoughts. They never engage in any practices to slow down the thoughts of the mind, and enough to basically put themselves into a state of consciousness where they're really doing that type of self-reflective shadow work. And because of that, whole left brain modality that most people just are constantly dwelling in like a cyclical pattern nonstop. It's just like a hamster on a wheel. They cannot quiet the mind and quiet the thoughts enough to get into that heart-based center, to center themselves and to really do that type of reflection that is so necessary to really gauge whether our behaviors are in harmony with natural law, meaning whether they are actually resulting in harm to other people or not. And this is where our society has to really start being honest with themselves, and also begin to learn practices by which that they can, quiet that ceaseless chatter of the left brain. Just the intellect that never ceases to just constantly spew out, words and thoughts. This is something that goes far deeper than just language. It's something that, it often is not going to be able to be communicated by language. You're going to have to do introspective work with yourself and your own soul. And that's something that most people are incredibly afraid of. It's something that it's the type of work that most people just are so loath to do that they would almost rather die than do work like that. And this is part of my work, is to try to explain to people this is what the most important aspect of this entire transformative process is for ourselves and the world. If you don't do the work upon yourself first, there is no way that you could try to go out into the world and start influencing others, at least not with not without creating something that is not going to be really stable, and at the worst case potentially even harmful. So right. You have to get yourself repaired. You have to work through the traumas. You have to work through the dark night of the soul and the very painful and negative aspects of the personality and your characteristics, of your personality that you may not like, that may be painful for you to look at. But without doing that, there is no self-transformation, and therefore you can never really be a truly positive, influential factor toward others to help them with that aspect of the great work, which is influencing them to then go through the same process. And the self-work must come first. If we try to put the cart before the horse and do the external work first, it's doomed to failure from Jump Street.
Right. Because for me, so much of the dynamic that you're talking about, it comes back to sort of this interplay between the principle of mentalism, which of course is the first one. Everything stems from the mind, from the psychological aspect. And I can say mind is different than your brain being more kind of the intellect, your mind sort of being that holistic consciousness that is all of those different aspects of the mind coming together, and then the law of correspondence. So it all starts with you, and then whatever you're putting out in the world is going to correspond to that first principle. And so if you haven't done that internal shadow work, you're just going to be what we call projectile vomiting all over everyone else, because you haven't dealt with that sickness that's within you first.
Absolutely. I mean, that's a great point. Yeah.
And, as you kind of taking it back to sort of defining terms, I thought it was useful to maybe consider like looking at the chakra system as well, and being that the heart that's why we called this talk the heart of the matter, because it's central to everything. And yes, you have your intellect up here, and that's very important, but then you have the lower, and it's all coming together, and the heart is where it all like meets and activates, your true core being from within.
You have those higher chakras, connection to source, the crown, but then you have the third eye chakra, which is about bringing together the left and right brain hemispheres, being aware, being, voice, but not just communicating externally, but communicating with yourself, maintaining an open line of communication with your own soul. Okay. And then, the lower chakras, the the base, connection to earth and resources, and being able to actually, work with on the material plane. The desire chakra, the sacrum chakra, which is about, passion and, the desire to learn more and move things forward and be creative. And then, of course, the solar plexus, which is about courage, courage to do the right thing, and this is all these other aspects of the self have to connect into that central chakra, which is the heart chakra. And if we just even look at the chakra system from the Vedic tradition as the planetary system, I've mapped that out in an infographic in the past in some of my podcasts, and showed it, with the sun as the crown, and then moving outward, you would have the third eye chakra would be Mercury, and then the throat would be Venus, and then the heart chakra is Earth. Okay. And then moving beyond that, the solar plexus would be Mars, and then the sacrum would be Jupiter, and then finally the base would be Saturn. But Earth is right there in the center, of that septenary, of energies, and it's that's why everything is happening here. This is where we come to go through that learning process, to go through that developmental process of the soul. That's what this planet is for, ultimately.
It's where the heavens meet the earth.
That's right. And that's in the Vedic, the Indus Valley traditions, out of which a lot of the Western mystery traditions derive from, and also Eastern traditions. But then you have, of course, you guys I know are very much into the Norse traditions, which I'm sure you could discuss that even much more in depth than I could, although it resonates quite a bit with me, as well. But I, as I understand it, then Midgard, representing basically the earth plane, is that central heart, center. Yeah. In the Norse tradition. So there's an overlap in all of these traditions of different occultic schools of thought, but they're really saying the same thing with different visual imagery and symbolism.
A point that you had brought up, Mark, there that you hit on is that some people would actually rather die than go through the process of actually doing the self-work and healing. And I think that can play out not only on the psychological and emotional realm, but even we can see it, from the shamanic perspective manifest into the physical body. Like a lot of people will let their physical health degrade to a point that they actually die rather than take the initiative to self-reflect and then take action to fix that.
Wow.
And it can very much be so in the spiritual sense. So that's, why at the, the Wizard Factory, and, and one of the big things we teach is, being willing to die in battle, what that really means in our tradition, and being fearlessly. Yeah. And that's, I think looking to the mythology for, Odin is a great example of this, what it means to what we call a spiritual warrior, where you're willing to sacrifice yourself unto yourself, that lower awareness and understanding, being willing to have that literally just ripped apart and destroyed so you can come into a higher level being. But that takes a self-sacrifice, and it's not easily won either. You have to, Odin in the mythos he hung himself on the Yggdrasil for 9 days and 9 nights, and he sacrificed his eye in the well of Mimir. But, he wasn't coming from a place of already having all this knowledge and awareness. He was constantly seeking to come into a higher state of being. So I think that was something really interesting that you hit on. And another thing that you hit on that I think is really profound that a lot of people forget is that indeed, the mind is more than the intellect. Even in astrology, when I explain, if we want to look at the intellect, we look at Mercury. It's that ability to pick apart from among, very quick communication, analytical skills. And that's a very useful tool. That, that's what we refer to as, look, the moon, or, also, in the ancient tradition, it was known, the same word for Mon, when it meant human being, mind, and moon. So to be a true Mon, a true human being, meant that you had a mind, a moon that reflected the light of the sun, the soul, So I think those are some very interesting things that you kind of hit on that I think we can delve into. And
I was kind of just thinking, while Mark was talking about the chakras and then how the third eye is that when the hemispheres come together, I saw a flash of the cross in my mind, because the cross, you have the vertical, that would be the chakras going up and down, and then the two, sides being the hemispheres all connecting in the middle. And then oftentimes you see that little circle on the cross reflecting, representing the sun. It's like all of those different things converging into the heart of the matter.
Yeah, and it's about all the different factors that have to come together for that true heart-based intelligence to be born. We have to be willing to invest time, attention, energy, resources. It is a process of both, as Brian was referring to, of ego death. It's about the death of the lower self, which people are very emotionally clinging to. They don't want to let go of any of the aspects of who they erroneously believe that they are at this very worldly, base, worldly physical self. So we're not taught any of this, from when we're young in our culture. Pretty much anywhere in the world, really. It's like we place all this emphasis on left brain knowledge and math, science, literature, etc. And there's nothing wrong with those things; they're all important. But we do very little in the way of understanding our own psychology and our own spirituality. So much, it's so imbalanced in educational systems today that most people don't even think there is anything to spirituality or consciousness. They're stuck in this ancient, Newtonian materialistic paradigm of science that completely leaves consciousness and spirituality at the door. And, this is an outdated ancient paradigm of science that's long been disproven. Yes.
Right. Ironically, we look a lot at the eugenicists, and they talk a lot about IQ. So it's ironic that they put so much emphasis on what it really is, this intellect quotient, because it takes no account into those things that you just mentioned, and it puts full emphasis on the left brain forms of intelligence, and all the other stuff is almost laughable to them. They scoff at that.
A true intelligence quotient test would also test someone's morality. It would test your sense of morality and ethics, and that's not done. So how could it possibly be called an intelligence quotient? Like you said, that's all it is an intellect quotient. So but another aspect I wanted to briefly address is the self-sacrifice aspect of this. It's not only an ego death process, but to really break down the lower self is a process of self-sacrifice in what it involves, because it does involve an amount of time, because of how rigidly into the left brain and just the intellectual part of the mind we are invested and rooted because of our culture and how the education system works. So to actually do that breaking down process, that process of putrefaction in the alchemical tradition, as they call it, to break down the old personality of the lower self, can often take years of time, a huge investment of not only time, but like a drive to want to do it, because of most people, they'll see how difficult it is, and then they'll back away, or they'll be like, oh wow, this is like ugly and horrible compared to what they might initially think it's going to be, and then they'll like stop and say, oh, this far and no further. So to really go through that process, it is not only an ego death process, but it is self-sacrifice, because of what you are going to have to truly give up as far as other things that you may have wanted to do, the time investment that it's going to cost you, possibly money that it may cost you in the physical world because you may not take opportunities to do certain things that would have financially paid higher end dividends. So you would have to forego certain things, and this is what most people don't want to do. They don't understand that the payoff spiritually will be so much greater than anything that they imagine that they have now or could have in the future, in the physical world, in a monetary sense or in a possession sense, etc. And unfortunately, that's what our culture teaches us to value, and it doesn't teach us to value this true heart-based intelligence and the process that goes about really truly building that true intelligence.
Yeah, that plays into something I was actually going to mention is the irony here where they look at all that's required and the years and all that, and they say like, oh, that's so much work, as if the suffering caused by denying truth is somehow easier, and all the energy they're going to put into being confused and conflicted and manifesting chaos through their unconscious behavior and stuff is somehow favorable. That's the insanity of it.
Not to mention what it's doing to all the people of the world, to the animals, to the earth, to the environment, etc. It's like, look at that. That's not an equal trade-off or payoff. Just to stay in that same modality of consciousness, it's actually doing more harm to the individual. And other
more work.
Yeah,
it's way more work to maintain that level of chaos.
It's like a full-time job to remain that ignorant of self. You literally have to exert effort.
You gotta try. Yeah.
You figure that this type of knowledge would be coming to them almost through osmosis, from how much more prevalent it is in our society, that there are so many inroads into different forms of spirituality and occult schools of thought. Now, there has been quite a spiritual and occult resurgence. It's certainly hasn't been enough for a mass paradigm shift, a quantum shift in consciousness to happen, so that we can take down this control system that we are all slaves embedded within. But at least there is so much information out there, and this is a form of knowledge. It is heart-based intelligence, of course, but that also knowledge plays a big role in that, because again, conscience is knowledge. To go back to that, a lot of people think that conscience is just behavior. The exercise of conscience is behavior. I think it's a very important thing to discern here. Actually doing actions is exercising conscience or failing to, but conscience itself is knowledge. It comes from the Latin roots. Con is a prefix in Latin meaning together or with, and then the word science, which is about knowledge, comes from the Latin verb sciere, which means to know or to understand. So when we put them together, understanding, knowing together. Common sense. That's what conscience is. It is a form of knowledge, not behavior. Where behavior comes into it is when we use our free will to then act upon what we have come to know regarding what's right and what's wrong, and then we willfully choose one over the other. We either choose the right action over the wrong action, or in full knowledge, we choose the wrong action over the right action, and that's always going to cause chaos and destruction. The problem is, the vast majority of people of the world are held back from the knowledge of the actual objective difference between right behavior and wrong behavior, and so they're operating almost blind. It's like never knowing how to do arithmetic and then trying to jump in and do calculus. The actual objective knowledge between right and wrong is like arithmetic. These are the building blocks for our exercise of conscience, but then the complex decisions that we might be need to make during our daily lives, throughout our life, that's the calculus that is going to rely upon that arithmetic, those basic building blocks of what is the difference between right and wrong behavior, which actions are harmful, which actions initiate harm to other people, and it's a very short list. It's murder, assault, rape, theft, trespass, coercion, and lying. Those are the things that violate other people's rights. Those are the behaviors we should not be engaging in. It's very simple. And all of those are a form of theft. This is where you could condense it all down, and heart-based intelligence can come down to one very simple thing. Don't take that which does not belong to you. Don't take other people's life, rights, property, freedom, etc. Freedom of speech. That's what it's all about. Not stepping on other people and their rights and doing harm to them, their body, their freedom, etc. It would all be a form of theft. So we can really step into heart-based intelligence by just understanding, don't take from others that which does not belong to you. Just don't steal. All wrongdoings are a form of theft in some way, shape, or form. Murder is the theft of life without right. Assault is the theft of physical well-being without right. A theft of property. Trespass is the theft of one's security in their living space or domain without right. And then, coercion is the theft of free will without right, and lying is the theft of pertinent information that one needs to know to make informed decisions.
Informed consent.
Right. Yeah. Yes, exactly.
Mm-hmm.
So,
I came up with this very simple little thing the other day. I think you'll appreciate. Morality is truth in action. It's such a simple way to place that, but that's, if you think about that, it's all there. All the pieces are there. Morality is just truth in action.
Sure. It's about behavior, and we have the free will to choose based on our inner knowing, and not just inner knowing, but also, breaking it down and understanding, this is what rightful property is. This is a form of theft. This violates someone's rights. This initiates harm. If we just make the free will decision not to initiate harm to other sentient life, then we're going to see our society transform radically for the better, because that's how natural law works. That's how the law of freedom works. As a society becomes more moral, they become more free. They're becoming more enlightened to what real morality is, and then they're using their free will through action, all based on that truth of the objective difference between right and wrong. Then they're taking it into the realm of action, as you're saying, truth brought into the realm of action, okay? And then they're willfully choosing right behavior over wrong behavior. And when we do that, then we're going to see a society become infinitely more free, because as morality increases, freedom increases. If we do the opposite, exactly, a society becomes more free and prosperous the more moral that it is. And
that's what
immoral it is.
Feminine care does. Is it allows that growth, that thriving, that connection and interplay and everything like that, and that love frequency.
That's right, and that's why it's called the generative principle. Is the care coming from the true intelligence of the heart is what is creating our experience. That's the real law of attraction, and this is what's so left out of the fake New Age variant law of attraction. They leave the objective morality part at the door, which is the thing that can never be left out of the equation. Because again, if somebody doesn't have that knowledge and they're operating blind, they're going to create chaos half the time at least, okay? And if a whole society doesn't have that knowledge and or are willfully choosing wrong over right, that immorality is going to constantly compound, and it's going to generate chaos, slavery, it's going to destroy freedom, and it's going to cause all the things that we say that we don't want in society. But in order to get to where we do want to be, we have to develop that knowledge of the difference between right and wrong, and then use our free will to choose it in every moment to do the right thing over the wrong thing, or in other words, not to steal, not to take that which does not belong to us, because all wrongdoings are a form of theft.
I have something here that you hit on a little while ago. It's, when thinking about this heart-based intelligence, you were talking about the value of it. If people just understood that, yes, it's hard work, but when you understand the true value of it, you would realize that it's a treasure that you could give and give of, and it would not run out. it's the most valuable treasure you can, and I think that's why we keep it in our chest,
Yeah, exactly.
So,
It's unbelievable.
it,
When you really learn this and you really apply it in your life, you will see how situations will change for you and how avenues will open up for you and how you'll become more prosperous. You'll develop more healthy relationships. You'll, just lead a better, happier existence in general. Now, that is not going to necessarily make you happier about the state of the world when you see how the colossal ignorance of other people when you take these principles into account and you realize how many people are just flailing away blindly and or just don't want to know and or just absolutely try to tell you that there's nothing to this, when many people have actually done this and lived it in their life and actually seen the difference that living these principles will create, but there's still people that are hardened into that ego-based, left brain only, Newtonian materialism worldview paradigm, and cannot understand how that is just holding them back from having the things that they say that they want to have in their life. But as long as their mindset stays like that, they can never actually create the physical manifestations in the real 3D physical world, because ultimately it's all based upon the principle of mentalism, which is the very first principle of natural law, that as we think, then that's going to be how our behavior is based, and then therefore that's how the manifested reality is going to play out. Everything ultimately derives from the mind, and then we're using our heart-based intelligence in connection with that knowledge to then take action. So if it's right, it's going to create freedom and order and prosperity. And if it's wrong, it's going to create chaos, slavery, and destruction. And that's why it's important to get the knowledge of the difference between right and wrong behavior correct. It is important to be correct even intellectually when it comes to the understanding of this objective difference between right behavior and wrong behavior. But then we have to always apply our care to it, because that's where our inner core our inner core spiritual strength comes from. That's the ultimate center of spiritual strength. The care combines with will to then take whatever action we're going to take through our free will, and that's literally the action then is literally manifesting the conditions that we then all experience together. It's not only manifesting the conditions that we'll experience as individuals, but then it's manifesting the aggregate experience. And this is another thing a lot of the New Age variant of this law of attraction leaves out. It'll put in the thoughts and the emotions, but it'll leave out the behavior. Okay.
Right.
Actions, the will, okay, to actually do the right thing, okay, and and it'll leave out the aggregate part. We're not all individually, changing reality, and it's all different just for everybody. We have a shared experience of reality as human beings together on this planet.
It's like a God complex. They act like we're all just walking around in our own separate little universes, and we just create our own realities, and it doesn't have anything to do with everyone else's.
Right, that's solipsism ultimately. Solipsism is like, nothing exists but me. The universe revolves around me. It's a very dangerous religious form of thought, as far as I'm concerned. So we have to understand this is all about the aggregate condition, and as we change ourselves, we contribute to changing the aggregate condition. That's why the self work is so important, because the world cannot change unless the individuals change, because they are contributing to the aggregate change.
Yes, that's definitely what this is bringing up for me too, and really with a central theme that we can look at with heart-based intelligence is it really goes down to a boundaries issue and sovereignty of knowing and respecting both yourself and others. And this is why one of the runes that Logan and I talk about the most is the Thurisaz rune. The rune of Thor, who is the archetype that he is boundaries. He is that protector that both can help you give your sense of self, but make sure that you are not violating the boundaries of others as well. So it's working, within your own microcosm and then reflecting out to society in the macrocosm as well.
I think it's
yeah.
No, go ahead. Continue.
Okay, so many issues go back down to that that basic boundaries issue. So I think that's very interesting to look at. But what were you saying, Mark?
I was going to chime in a little bit about your take with the rune that you were speaking of, regarding it's symbolic of Thor and Thor's hammer, and
Yes.
talk a little bit about the Norse mythical traditions regarding
Sure.
Thor, who fights and conquers the frost giants, who are representing
Hmm.
forces that actually combat this heart-based intelligence and try to freeze it. Okay,
Yes.
and Thor is that sense of conscience and doing the right thing and battling these types of demons. That it's all about thawing. The frost giants that will conquer the heart if we let them. Okay, it's an
Hmm.
allegory of
This
rich
fiery red beard.
tradition. Yeah, so
Hmm.
he was a solar mythos savior, because this is all
Hmm.
about the male child of of the creator god, that then actually performs that act of self-sacrifice, and then therefore through that act of sacrifice changes the world and renews
Hmm.
it and rejuvenates it. So Thor is one of the a solar part of the whole solar savior mythos that Christianity is based upon. It's another variant of it that came from the Norse tradition. And the allegory about fighting and battling and conquering the frost giants is literally about that ego death, breaking down those demonic or dark aspects of the personality and developing true heart-based intelligence, and then becoming someone that can then influence society for the better, and therefore, quote unquote, save
Right.
the world, save humanity. So I resonate
Absolutely.
with those traditions tremendously. You see, I'm
Hmm.
wearing Mjolnir. I have been for a long
Absolutely.
time. Because I think that those traditions, if we really understand them, it will profoundly affect the way that we really think about
Right.
reality and these inner core aspects of our self.
And to
Hmm.
tie that back to mind control a little bit too, it's all based in trauma. It's the trauma-based mind control. What trauma does is it disrupts your sense of self. It's a violation of your boundaries, and it creates damage to that construct. And so some people kind of implode, and they have no boundaries whatsoever, and they become that sort of like it's the master and slave dynamic. That's how that's created, is either their boundaries become disintegrated, and they start attracting people that will just constantly make them a doormat, or they're projecting their boundaries outwards to overcompensate for those boundaries being encroached on, and they're just like stepping on everyone else's toes through that.
It's all
And while
ultimately
we were
about trauma from childhood,
mhm,
because the personality gets ingrained into a person, at around 7 years of age, and then any traumas that were done before then or even after then into adolescence are going to be carried with us well into adulthood. And most people don't have techniques for dealing with those types of psychological traumas or physical traumas that have negatively informed the personality. They don't have techniques for dealing with that. They don't have techniques for recovering from that type of trauma from childhood. So that's why it's very important to learn techniques on how to do that.
self-educate. You ain't
EFT.
gonna learn that shit in school.
They're not teaching that because they want people coming out of the educational ringer broken. Broken people are easier to control. They're going to be
School
looking externally for somebody to take care of them. And the
school
government,
itself is very traumatizing to
without
young
a doubt,
people.
the whole
Mhm.
educational system is a traumatic gauntlet that we are forcing children to go through, without
Mhm.
a doubt.
And taking that back to what we were talking about, the expenditure of energy into the healing, the learning, acquiring the knowledge and all this kind of thing, and how the payoff of living a life of madness, chaos, and suffering. To tie it back to another rune, this one right here is called the Nauthiz rune, and this basically is what it comes back to the need. They say necessity is the mother of invention. is like how much suffering is required. How many times do we have to continually bang our head on the rocks before we say, okay, enough is enough? Maybe we need to take things back to the core principles and learn the truth that does not change, and that is, that we're constantly fighting against in this insane game that we're playing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that Nauthi's rune is definitely, it looks like two sticks rubbing together. So if you can imagine someone in Ice Age Europe, when everything's frozen, like really needing some fire, trying to, that need fire, you're really wanting it. That's that kind of need. But it's also that need that a lot of times we see that this whole transformation, the beginning of this process comes out of that, because we can get to a point that, I know in my own life, I was so filled with rage. Like I was definitely on the level of a secondary psychopath, because when I, as I've talked about before, when I joined, the Marine Corps Infantry, I joined specifically with the purpose of intending to go do harm to people and knowing that I'd be able to get away with it and get rewarded for it. And, I would be radically honest about that. But again, because, what you were talking about, Mark, with the Frost Giants and Thor, it goes back to that boundaries issue. And interestingly enough, the realm of Jotunheim on the Helm of Aegir is associated with the realm of the East. That's why in the mythos, Thor is always going to the East to fight the giants. And on the psychological level, this is the realm that we associate with the ego and how we interact with ourselves. So we can see the Thyrses and giants, that they just represent the ego in the unhealthy form. Not the healthy sense of self, but the narcissistic ego that's out of control, so much so that it's just trying to smash and destroy everything around it. And then, Thunar, Thor, who is, he is the electromagnetic force. Thor's the, he's what, that's what keeps you, from going through your chair, your hands from going through each other. This is what is boundaries. And his name also is interesting to look at when we can see that root word of Thu. It's, he's the Lord of the ambrosial nectar of the moon. So Thunar in the Norse tradition is also associated with the moon, the lunar, because it's associated with the mind. So he's a god of the mind. A lot of people think that, he has a quick, he's got a very quick temper, and, he doesn't really think before he acts. But it's not that. It's that he's tapped into the higher mind. He thinks so quickly that he just will react quicker. And very much so, anytime he sees some kind of like violation or harm being done, that's when he steps up, hammer.
It's also the lunar intuitive aspect, because he has both sides of the intelligence, and it's also about introspective and going into the darkness, the night side of things, the things that aren't easily seen, the occult, if you will, it is about all that integration. It's the masculine and feminine principles coming together in that sacred union,
One thing about that
very rich allegorical tradition that I think people have to decode a lot more. Not only
so rich.
Yeah, the stories really have, if people like read, the Edda, the poems of the Eddas, etc., and you just go into the allegorical traditions of them, because they're telling us things that are within all of us. They're not about external stories of just hero myths. It's all about inner psychological dynamics and aspects of the self.
And one quick little thing about that Thurisaz rune as well, that again, that it represents Thor, it actually looks like a thorn, a thorn, which is, what is this Thor but saying, this is me, respect my boundaries.
Right.
I'm beautiful, but I will hurt you if you, encroach too far.
It's also
only if you encroach.
Right. In a defensive capacity, exactly. It's also a very, simplistic, way of viewing the hammer or the axe, which is an ancient, tradition, symbolic tradition that represented power, authority in the sense of really setting an example. Not necessarily like authority in the sense of controlling people, but it
Truth
was
as the authority.
Right, exactly. So it's an archetype that what was about how real power works. How if we do engage in right behavior in the world, doors are opened up unto us, and even forces of nature will assist us in our evolutionary progression thereafter. But if we don't, all the forces of nature will be arrayed against us. This is really what the sacred hammer or axe of many ancient traditions that underlies not only the Norse tradition, but the traditions of Freemasonry and other occult traditions.
Like the fasces.
Yes, exactly. Was ultimately originally about. It's similar to the Ankh in the Egyptian tradition, in that the Ankh didn't just represent life or eternal life; it represented, really contextually, prosperous life, fortuitous life, because you were arrayed with the forces of truth and goodness and true morality, and therefore all of nature's forces would come to your assistance, and you would lead a more prosperous life that was not beset with so many, so much degradation and trials and tribulations. Like, things, of course you would still have struggles in life, but it wouldn't be like a total self-inflicted drama of suffering like what we are experiencing here on earth now, needlessly. And so the hammer or the axe of these ancient traditions really represented a fortuitous life lived in harmony with nature and nature's laws, and it was about prosperousness and life that would be upheld by the forces of nature for into eternity. So that's where this whole idea of eternal life came from, with the whole resurrection mythos. But it would be lived in prosperity and in high level of energy supported by nature into the foreseeable future, for as far as one could possibly project, and that's where the idea came from. And I think people often get this wrong with the Ankh, and often get it wrong with the Hammer of Thor. It's really about connecting with natural law, and then that's the whole idea of the worthiness to wield worldly power, or power that is supported by the nature forces, and it is very much connected with the ancient Egyptian or Cometian tradition in that regard, because I would consider that the Ankh and Mjolnir in many ways represent the exact same things when it comes to natural law and morality.
Right. In fact,
Go ahead, Logan.
Okay. All right.
Sorry.
Well, I was going to hit on this point here where, to kind of bring it back to our main topic this evening about heart-based intelligence, is ultimately the best love that you can have coming from here is the love for truth, because that's going to align everything else about your consciousness into the way that it ought to be. And so not only are you creating a loving, heaven on earth for yourself, but everyone else. You're creating that, utopia, as the statists like to say about, anarchy or whatever, is, by aligning yourself with actual truth, caring for that truth, you're going to create objective good for yourself and others. And that all extends outwards from within.
That's what was meant by agape in the ancient Greek mystery traditions, which of course came out of Egypt. There were different forms of care or love energy, because we'll say energy of the heart, love, care, etc. And of course people will think of interpersonal relationships and interpersonal dynamics between human beings. Of course, that's a valid and wonderful form of love. We have the relationship between men and women, from which all life, human life, comes from. So that was eros in the Greek, ancient Greek language, and it was romantic love or love between man and woman. But then there was
like erotic from erotic.
Yes, exactly. That's where the root comes from. Yes. And then, you extend that out to a wider community, and you have the love between just general human beings, love of brother and sister, because we're all ultimately a human family on this planet.
So
we all share the same, origins. We all have the same basic genetic code. We all have the same needs and things that we need to thrive and survive and thrive in the world. And we all have the same rights under natural law. So that would be philos. And this is where the word philanthropic comes from, love of man, and woman.
Philadelphia.
Philadelphia, the city that I'm from, the city of brotherly love. So this is, brotherly and sisterly love, platonic love, as it's been called. But then there's one higher form. Yes.
It's like a hierarchy. It all comes from that agape at the top that extends outwards in a proper hierarchy that's not based in domination, but actually of love, unity, and the laws of nature.
And that's the way it's
all supposed to be.
This connects with what you were just saying. The real heart-based intelligence is ultimately at the highest level about care for truth. If you don't have that care for truth, you're not going to want to learn what the difference between right and wrong and then apply it in the world to make the world better. So care for truth, that's agape, that's wide love, that's care for what is true, what is right, what is good. That's care to align your mind, body, and soul with the will of creation. That's ultimately what agape was all about, because it's saying that I need to care about what is right for everything and everyone. It's care at the universal sense, the universal level, and that's where I think our society is sort of falling short. They're not looking beyond even just what they want for themselves on a daily basis. They're not even in a sense of true care for even other people. They're still in this, service to self only modality. And that's what Satanism really is. That's where all the dark occult comes out of. It's only caring about yourself and not caring about what's right or good in general, let alone caring for other people. So it resonates very deeply what you said, because the real core of heart-based intelligence ultimately is care for truth, and I would call that agape. And that
aligns with what you say often when you say you serve the truth, which some people might consider or sort of interpret that as a cold thing, like I'm not here for you all, I'm here to serve the truth. But as it extends out in that hierarchy, like you just said, you care for others by extension of that love for truth at the highest. And Brian, what were you going to say?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, to back it up here for a second, I wanted to hit on something that you brought up there, Mark, when you were talking about the Mjolnir as well as the Egyptian Ankh.
Sure.
A lot of people don't, they forget in the mythos that Thor doesn't only carry the Mjolnir, his hammer, but he also, to be able to pick up his hammer, he has to wear his belt, and he has to have his iron gloves.
Right.
And this is a code for secret energy work. A lot of people don't realize this. But there's an energy practice known as the Thor's Hammer energy practice, where you actually, in your lower dantian, the lower navel, you create the belt of Thor. You have to create the belt first, so that you're storing up all your prana, your chi, and lower dantian. And this is why, like, a lot of martial artists, they'll wear the sash, around the kidneys and that, because it's supposed to be able to keep kidneys warm, and it stores that energy in your navel. So you're building up that life force energy. And you had said that, to be able to wield this hammer, to be able to wield these things properly, you have to be connected with source. You have to connect with that life force energy. And then the iron gloves, this again is more energy work. It's being able to have to where you can direct energy out of your palms. And then once you do that, you can then form the hammer. And this is actually, a specific practice that at some point we'll get into teaching in some of our content. But, I think that's very interesting to look at, is to be able to wield these things. These are something that you can actually create yourself and use on an energetic level, but you have to be able to build up and store that energy to get, your system cleaned out and be able to connect with that source energy and know how to utilize it in a direct gnosis of your own system mechanics and how you operate.
Very interesting. And the idea of the belt and the gloves can also connect with willpower and right action, near the solar plexus chakra, and then, with the belt, and then the gloves on the hands, this is what we, take action with, and go out and affect others in the world through our behavior, with our hands, etc. So it's another layer to the allegory symbolically.
I like that a lot. That's great.
Yeah. It's like the sacral chakra, the root chakra, that action, very interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, a question that we wanted to ask you here, Mark, what are some of the techniques that you specifically like to use to be able to get into that heart space, to get, out of your head into your body? What are some things that you use, meditations, breathing techniques, whatever that may be?
Well, generally, I use transcendental meditation, which is very simple, quieting of the mind, often focusing on either the breath, the rising and fall of the breath, or a simple word to be used as a mantra. And what it will do is help you, and there are many, many other techniques. I mean, you could do walking meditations, you could do EFT tapping, tapping on meridian lines of the body. It's another form of healing energy, but and centering oneself. But simple transcendental meditation was the tool that I kind of used to learn how to quiet the left brain chatter of the mind and put myself into a centered space, not only for doing introspective work upon myself, but for doing actual, work, regarding all of the knowledge about what's taking place in our world and disseminating that to others, because it can be very, very physically taxing, and to do this kind of work, we have to first be able to put ourselves in a quiet, introspective space. And most people, studies have been done on this where they'll try to even just, have people sit quietly in a room by themselves with no other stimuli, just a very plain room with not much to look at, just a simple chair, and no electronic devices, no screens of any kind, no books, nothing. Just, can you sit quietly in a room with yourself? And all of these studies that they've done with these psychological experiments have come back showing that our society is just absolutely wretchedly horrible at doing just a simple thing like that, where less than 1 in 100 people can do it without freaking out, or begging for the experiment to be ended, and it's this is what we're not practicing. A very simple practice is just quieting your environment and being by yourself with no other stimuli going on. Okay, even if you do this in the morning when you're first waking up, if you take a break in the middle of the day and do it, or if you do it at night before you're going to go to bed, before actually sleeping, I'm not one of the people who, as there are many people who take a different approach to this, who feel that you have to do it for a long time each day. And I personally never did really take that approach, nor do I continue to think that that is a necessary aspect of the approach, as long as you do it wholly and completely for a short amount of time, in a disciplined way for a short amount of time. Now, the problem is most people cannot do that, at least not at first, and so it will take longer even for them to get into that space. But you will, meditation will be different for just about everybody with what they will experience, in a physical sense, in a mental sense, what processes will go on in the body, what they will feel emotionally, etc. But in general, simply stepping into a quiet, space where you are not talking, where you're not doing any other activity for short amounts of time during the day, and you're just attempting to let thoughts just keep passing through you. Don't focus on any particular thought. That's where the whole transcendental aspect of it is. You're transcending thought and constant activity. So when you're doing that, you're not just emptying your mental space of the thoughts that you would normally be thinking. Actually, you're making room. This has been described as you're actually making room for other energies and processes to help you and heal you and influence you to not only do the right thing, but really understand then what your work is to do to help others. So simple transcendental meditation was my technique that I used to start to work with the trauma that I had gone through in the past in my life, and to start to try to attempt to discipline my mind enough that I would be able to be in a space where I would be able to do the work that I needed to do to kind of aggregate all the information that I did, arrange it, put it together, help people to understand it, and help influence other people to then go through that same process. I feel like if I didn't really learn meditative techniques in the past when I was younger, that I would not have been as successful in putting the type of curriculum, if you will, together that I have, because I would not have been disciplined enough, to forego the other things that I wanted to do or that were acting as distractions. It really helped not only to heal traumatic experiences from the past that I was then able to introspectively deal with because of learning, this practice of self-healing, but it really, to me, it prepared the way for me to be able to do my work in a disciplined way. I've always kind of been very willful and, keep hammering away at something until I get it done. But I think the meditative practice helped to put me in that caring space for what am I really trying to accomplish here? And it's about again, as we were talking about, not just care for truth, but by extension of care for truth, care for the suffering of everyone, and without that type of meditative practice and healing energy, I don't know if I would have come out of my former left-brained dominant mindset and developed that care to want to try to find, one of the best methods of helping, which is really teaching natural law. And that's really what it enabled me to do, into the future with my work with What on Earth is Happening. So transcendental meditation was my main technique. Of course, there are many others. I mean, there are tons of shamanic techniques, breath work.
We teach quite a few of them on the channel.
Breath work is, I know that's very huge in the Norse tradition in particular.
Yes,
I've taken a very small class on it in the past here in Philadelphia with I cannot remember the teacher's name. It was very good. It was visualization, meditation, and breath work. And it was, all of these techniques are not only valid, but are tremendous value, and there are many others. I mean, there's, dancing,
music for me.
Yeah, music.
When I play my guitar, it all just quiets.
Rhythmic drumming.
From here,
yeah. Playing an instrument.
And I think, painting, I think a big thing to hit on there is that you mentioned that everybody will experience meditation in a different way, and I find that very interesting, because when we can look at this through astrology, we can see that the mind is associated with the moon. So depending on everyone's going to have their moon in a certain sign in a specific house in the Vedic tradition, also in a specific nakshatra in the pada. So there's all these layers, and everybody has a different placement. So what works for one person may not work for another.
Yes.
But when we can, use this art of gnosis, and then you can start to learn how to develop ritual and some of these other things, you can actually specifically go and look at what the energetic needs are of your moon. Like you can see what elements it wants to work with by looking at its placements and where it's sitting. So then you can start to bring a whole nother layer of gnosis. So you can do the breath work, meditations and visualizations, but then you can also start, from a very, kind of scientific approach, specifically designing ritual for yourself to target those areas. And I think a big theme that you're hitting on there, what you're saying with Mark, is that how it opened up room for you. What I see that as it's clearing out the subconscious and the unconscious mind, because we have to understand that we're not just one self. We have multiple levels of stuff. In the Norse tradition, we look at that we're actually made up, of a community of beings. And that subconscious and unconscious mind, those are the deep waters where a lot of this programming is held. It's been pushed down so long because it was a traumatic experience. And in order to adapt to our society, the environment we're in, we had to continually push these experiences down. And then they become, where society kind of gets in a state of that complex or compounded post-traumatic stress, that that trauma that they keep society in, that allows them to play on this. So being able to use these techniques are really allowing us to start to clear out that unconscious mind, bring what got pushed down up to the surface, so then you can have an opportunity to look at it, change the way you're interacting with it, feel it, process it, and then let it go and move on. So then you can open yourself up for everything else that's out there, and what is out there doesn't stop. There's just always more. Right. And it's such an exciting journey when you can stop fighting it and really fully embrace, step into it fearlessly. I mean, there's so much reward there.
Those are fantastic points. Another aspect I want to bring up to add to that is daydreaming, or just simple contemplation. They want people always in that left brain modality from when they're very young. That's what the whole school system is for, the compulsory schooling system. They want them constantly just running through that rat wheel of the left brain, but never actually doing some creative thought processes,
imagination.
Yes, exactly. Yep. Imagination and daydreaming, those are healing factors as well. Those are things that can help to heal traumatic experiences as well.
Which is funny, because that's what they always tell you.
Dissuaded from doing it.
Stop daydreaming, which is just further traumatizing, because you think, when I do that, I get punished. So you're going to just shut that part of your brain down.
Yeah, or somehow it's wrong, that children shouldn't be doing that. That's exactly what
you have you have a disorder, you have a attention deficit disorder, and you need to be on drugs because there's something wrong with you for staring out the window. And
you don't like our bullshit.
They're forcing that consciousness modality change through chemicals. I mean, nothing could be
dark sorcery.
Nothing is more destructive. That's what it is. It's
we talked about that in our
sorcery.
Masculine episode.
Yeah. And Mark, something else
brought up. Sorry. Really quick.
Okay.
This brought up a movie, an allegorical movie that if anyone hasn't seen it, they should definitely check it out, because it's just soaking in meaning behind it. But The Nutcracker and Untold Story.
I have not seen it. I'll have to check it out.
Okay. So in there it has, these kind of, the rat beings or whatever that are coming in, and, they kidnap the children and they're keeping them in their factory. And what they do is they don't have an imagination themselves. So that's what they're actually harvesting from the children. They're stealing their imagination, and the children, they'll imagine something and it'll create toys, and then they'll take those toys and burn them for fuel in their factory. Wow. It's very interesting, and it's kind of like this family of rats that, and they see that they'll get like this kind of like green smoky looking liquid, that they'll get out of all this, and then they'll kind of like suck it up and just feed on it. And I mean, and that's really, looking at the innocence of the child and the power that they have to tap into that imagination. Like, that's where our magic comes from.
Exactly.
And that's what's being harvested and played on, and that's why they don't want you tapping into it, because then you're taking their power source.
I just wrote it down as you were talking about it, because I love allegorical movies. I think that's another powerful potential transformer for people's minds.
Because it speaks past the programming, and it speaks to the subconscious mind.
That's right.
To that inner child.
Exactly.
It could be even
Speaking
more
of-
powerful if you let it,
It's a great movie.
have that type of a subconscious effect, especially if it's for a positive reason. For
Mhm.
if designed to, elicit a positive transformation in a human being,
Right.
allegorically. Then when you decode
Mhm.
it and see what it means, it can be even more
Even more
powerful,
powerful.
because then it's not only working at the subconscious level, but you're bringing that subconscious understanding up to the conscious level and really deeply understanding it there as well. So that's why I
Right.
love watching
Absolutely.
allegorical films.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good
Speaking
one.
of, yeah,
It's so deep.
that right there reminded me of two more I could mention. First is, and I think these are two of the most absolutely powerful allegorical movies, and they're very much kind of geared towards children. One is The Dark Crystal.
A great one.
And
Yeah.
the emperor will go and kidnap these beings called the pod people, who are very like joyful and kind of childlike almost in a way, and strap them down and steal what they call their essence. And
Right.
like you said, Brian, but he'll like put it in a vial and drink it, and then that's what keeps him youthful, because obviously he doesn't have access to that from within himself. Another one that came to mind is The Neverending Story. If that whole movie is taking place inside the mind of Bastian, everything is a part of his imagination. And what is actually the villain in that movie? The Nothing.
Yep.
His imagination is being put to death,
Going
and
away.
being consumed by this just empty vacuum of nothingness. I mean, that's powerful right there.
Mm.
I mean,
That's
that is where really the death of our society begins, because real transformation and change has to start with the imagination. It has to start with being able to visualize something being a different way than it currently is. Then we turn our thoughts and our care and our actions into creating that change. But unless we can visualize it, we can't really make it happen. So that's why the imagination is so important. And I would consider it very connected with that heart-based intelligence as well, which is why the powers that be want to stomp it out.
Right. I was actually going to mention this a second ago, in line with this theme here, is that it's actually just as possible to arrive at the truths of natural law through heart-based intelligence rather than the intellect. A lot of the anarchy freedom community is extremely left-brain.
Yes.
And a lot of your followers, they're very analytical, very linear thinking. And even the ones who are kind of on the fence, they want you to like show them the proof of prove natural law to me,
Right.
as if it's not just everywhere at all times in everything that they do.
Right.
But through awakening this and actually having empathy, again, care for themselves and the world which we are all co-creating this experience of. And like you say, Mark, all the time about creating the things that we all say that we want, yet our actions are in direct opposition to. Really, that heart-based intelligence is right there, because that's how you through that loving energy create the abundance and the joy and the connection and the cooperation that is so much more conducive to everything that we all truly desire at our core.
Very, very well said. And I want to add to the point that you brought up regarding the truth and freedom community is very largely left-brained, especially when it comes to, the so-called freedom movement, politically. Libertarians, etc., even anarchists. You have a lot of left-brain modality thought, and even it goes even to the extremity of atheism in many cases, where they completely reject any form of spirituality. I think they've thrown the baby out with the bathwater because they have such a bad taste in their mouth about religion, which I can obviously understand. I think there's religions have done not much in the positive sense in the world, and have done a whole lot of harm as far as controlling people's minds and behaviors, and having wars fought over it, and still tons of cultural divide regarding religion in the modern day.
As a matter of fact, I think that's actually very deliberately done.
Sure.
Where the church and the state act as a proxy for nature, and so the trauma that comes along with the coercion of the threat of hell on the religious side of things makes people actually drive away from the idea of a divine intelligence of the universe.
That's right.
And likewise, the trauma that comes with the state saying, do what I say or will, harm you or put you in jail, makes people have an aversion to the idea of natural law too.
Yep.
Natural law, that's the opposite of anarchy. That's so counterintuitive.
They are pillars that lean against each other to create a very rigid dialectical structure that very few people can get out of. They can't get out of either the religions of authority, the state, or the cultural religions. And then if they do set those aside, then they think that religion tried to get me into their belief system, and then just spirituality is just another belief system. So it's all just physical matter, and there is no such thing as spirit, or there is no such thing as consciousness. Even that it can go to that extreme. I've actually heard people in the so-called freedom movement literally say to me that consciousness is a meaningless term to them, and I'm like, my God, it's like that's what everything is. That's the essence of everything. It's the underlying aspect of every aspect of you, of who you are, of what we all are. It's like, how could you say that doesn't exist? It's like that we're all expressions of consciousness. It's like the universe is an expression of consciousness. So, and they can't even think, many of them, not all, I don't want to make a blanket statement, but many of them can't even think at that level. That's literally how destroyed of spirituality they have become. It's a soul sickness. It really is. And the things that we're talking about here today are ways of modalities of healing. Really, it's about how to get out of that total existential mindset and understand there is more to things than the physical. There is more to reality than the physical. Intelligence is not in the brain. It's the essence of who we are is not in the body. We transcend those things at the ultimate level. And that's where all of the underlying intelligence in nature ultimately derives from. And it's like, I think that they have to just reevaluate and do some of these, practices like meditation, visualization, breath work, other shamanic practices, etc. Some people are so rigid and calcified that may take, work with psychedelics or, something to that effect, which, you have to do that correctly and, know what you're getting into, obviously. But, it's like, that's how far into the left brain ego that they are, and it's like, if they did start to understand the richness of some of this spiritual tradition and understand natural law, I think they would see so much value in their life would come of it, that they would not be going around on that, endless, hamster wheel, constantly saying that they want things to change, but things never really actually changing in the physical world. And it's because the mindset hasn't changed, and it's because the true care of the heart hasn't changed, and that's what we're trying.
Process sometimes, we got to burn our fucking hand on the stove.
That's right.
But hopefully we do it, we'll start noticing that, hey, that fucking hurts. And, start putting two and two together that, hey, if we do this, this is going to happen. And, start experiencing laws there that it can be discovered. And then once aligned with, it can be worked with and power in alignment with cosmic law. And these energies, and start using them and recognizing what's going on, you can start operating on a level that is.
I think those are those are incredible points that you've brought up there, because so many people see the Saturn energy as only in a bad light, and it's not. That's not the case at all.
Not at all.
It's the disciplinarian. It is the energy that will pull you back if you're not
your best friend, though.
You're not making correct progress. However, it is also support when we are doing the right thing. It's also a motivating factor. So and this is actually really it gets into like a proof of natural law. These guiding energies, it's like if we are acting as a society in the right way, because we understand the difference between right and wrong, and we're willfully choosing it. So we've become disciplined. Those energies we've worked with them, and we've developed that discipline to act correctly in the world, to be in the world in the right way. Then we're going to be supported by those energies. If, on the other hand, we choose to stay in that childlike mentality, and we don't work with those, energies dealing with natural law and the difference between right and wrong, learn them and then apply them, then the nature forces are going to always act in the disciplinarian sense. And that's what Saturn is. It's the disciplinarian of the septenary energies. And it's then going to act as something that's going to hold us back and keep us where we're at until we get that lesson. And then when we prove that we've gotten that lesson, then we can graduate to the next course in the cosmos.
This actually brings up something that
for a long time as well, because it's a slow-moving planet. So though it may take a long time to learn it, we'll have it for a long time. Sorry, Logan.
And that's that momentum. That's that momentum factor that I was talking about. It will carry into the future. Then that connects back with the energy of Thor's hammer and the Ankh of the Egyptian tradition as being representative of almost eternal fortuitous life, or just continuous fortuitous life, because that energy we've built a momentum with it for a long distance into the future.
It's almost like a correspondence to the physical law of momentum. It's the spiritual momentum. But this reminds me of something that I wrote that I think fits perfectly with this. I'm just going to read it real quick. So people act like natural law is some sort of prison system, and you Mark, you talk about how, the social engineers kind of have, that's sort of their worldview in a way.
That's the worldview of the dark occult, yes.
That they're not truly free because they're bound by the laws of morality. But the truth is, the only violations of this law entail the imposement of your will onto another. Is that really what freedom looks like to you? Why should your version of freedom be at the expense of another's? Is your freedom, more important than anyone else's? And this comes back, like, I came up with this new concept recently that it's really been sticking with me. Stay in your lane. You can kind of think of natural law as this mantra of just stay in your lane. We are all spiritual beings that have incarnated here with a specific purpose. And as long as you stay in your lane and don't bump into anyone else and impede their ability to be on their journey, then we're all going to do fine.
Yeah. And there will still be challenges.
Why you're trucking, Logan?
They're obviously
yeah. I'm just like
trucker. I know
literally did.
He could do a lot of damage if he comes out of his lane.
You gotta stay in
that literally came to me while I was driving. I was sitting there and somebody kept swerving into my lane, and I was thinking, stay in your lane.
Yeah.
Wait a minute. Stay in your lane.
Natural laws everywhere.
Exactly.
Sovereignty.
Show me the proof.
Yeah, it's not that hard not to infringe on the sovereignty of other beings.
Right.
I don't know what makes people
You're
think that has to be done.
Enslaved because you shouldn't. That you should respect other beings the way you want to be respected.
Right.
That's really that simple.
I think that's really a fantastic place to leave this conversation, because I think that really says what needs to be understood. We stay in the slipstream that creation intended for us, which is our own personal sovereignty and the sovereignty of others, and the mutual respect for that, mutual sovereignty. We are going to be able to experience Earth as it was intended to be, as a classroom for experiences, for learning and growth, and a crucible for a shared experience of creation. That we could create things that we can at this point scarcely even imagine, because of how much we're being held back by not behaving correctly and really living in harmony with natural law. So if we do stay in those lanes, those are evolutionary guideways. They're really course projections for where the universe really wants us to go and wants to send us, and that place really is filled with wonders. Like I said, we right now we're at such an embryonic stage, we can scarcely even imagine what's out there or what lies ahead for humanity if we can get past this stage, if we can get past this disciplinarian stage that we are really in, being like held in this sort of a prison environment, because we will not get this lesson of heart-based intelligence, which is all about correctly understanding natural law and then applying it in our lives. But if we do step into that heart energy, then we're going to be able to really collectively as a species evolve to levels that right now we can't even envision where that will go, where that evolutionary progression, that pathway will take us.
It's like the steering wheel, literally, that's driving our own evolution as spiritual beings.
And the good news is we are directing it. No, it's not being done to us.
Free will.
We have the free will to direct it ourselves. It's a choice. It's a choice in every moment.
Right. And Mark, one last thing, we wanted to make sure we included this into the talk tonight, is the concept of laughter and the value of laughter in transmuting, because ultimately all of the control structures that are in place are built upon the foundation of fear, and how powerful of an alchemical force that laughter can be to transmute and absolutely disempower that fear. So we wanted to kind of, get your thoughts on it.
I'm a huge fan of comedy. I know a lot of people don't see me laughing or having a whole lot of fun, because I do try to communicate things pretty seriously. We're living in serious times, but I mean, I could get outright silly in my whole.
I've seen it.
Yeah,
it's true.
Laughter is healing energy as well, and I do need to do it a lot more. We all do, because we can get heavy and weighed down with how bad things are really going. It's right. Be honest with ourselves, things are not going well. We're not on the right trajectory right now. We have the ability to turn it around, but we should make time to have humor in our lives, have good positive experiences in our lives with friends, and laugh and learn simultaneously. But there's power in humor for sure. I think a lot of people are putting that forward with memes that they put out that are really funny too, and get people really laughing. Yeah, without a doubt.
Totally.
It's a great new form of digital humor. But I like old school comedians like George Carlin. He was sort of a comedic shaman. I try to find some good, funny, modern movies, but comedy movies today aren't as good as they used to be in the past. I kind of tend to look to older, more 80s or 90s movies, but it's there's a big dip in sense of humor, especially among the young. A lot of them don't have a good active developed sense of humor, because of how the whole
brain
school system is
shut down.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So humor, that's a very great, valid point, that humor is really something that we should, always engage in, and take life seriously when we have to, but not take it seriously all the time, because that will keep us in a modality that really is going to burn us out. I can sometimes fall victim to that, but that's why I try to make time for, watching a funny movie here and there, or just, being silly,
Yeah. In a way, it's almost like letting them win. If we let them steal all the joy out of our lives and make everything about the great work, and this is really super serious, are you even enjoying the gift of this life that
Sure. And Brian, it is a balance. It's a difficult balance to achieve, because if you know a whole lot about what's really going on, you can definitely you
caught
feel
up in
all of that and feel the suffering very intensely. So it's you have to. It's part of engaging in that humor and lightheartedness is also about heart-based intelligence, because you will do harm to yourself and burn yourself out if you don't do that. So it very much connects back with heart-based intelligence.
It's an act of self-care.
Yeah. There's a few things that brought up for me. One that learning to laugh from the heart, you know, like to really feel it, to feel
Mm-hmm.
true joy, and then to express that fully. Like I know I'm a person, I have an utterly ridiculous laugh. But you know, I just absolutely love laughing because I when I was younger, I would, if I even saw anyone express emotions, it would just enrage me. Like that's how shut
Wow.
down I was. And laughter is such a useful tool for that. And I think another interesting point to look at is that, you know, the whole control system, mind control, is all built off fear of trauma, which is keeping you in that lower brain. When you laugh,
Right.
you immediately pull yourself into a higher state of being. And
Without
then,
a doubt, and that's why they want that joy sapped out of people. You know, they don't want them,
right.
you know, laughing and engaging with each other. You know, in
And they don't want laughed
edge.
at.
Yeah. Yeah.
Be afraid of being mocked.
Yeah.
Because if they you're afraid of them, you know, then that's exactly where they want you. But if